Great. Thank you so much, Sasha, for taking our time today. I was really excited to have this conversation with you. And like I said, one of the few people who have a broader understanding of the whole space. So would love to hear your own thoughts on a couple of points. But before we jump into, I think it'd be great if you could just kick it off with a short introduction about yourself.
Sure. It's always a little tough for me to introduce myself just because my professional trajectory has been kind of wide and far. And so, since you are kind of interested in hearing about that trajectory, I'll try to be succinct, but I'll say that the vision with which I kind of see the world professionally is through nutritional anthropology. And the biggest thing for me is I absolutely love talking about people's relationship with food across cultures, and how they integrate that with their lifestyle overall. So we tend to talk about lifestyles like fitness, diet, but for a lot of people, it doesn't exactly look like that. And so through that vision, I've kind of tried to deepen and widen my understanding of and experience with nutrition, fitness, wellness, in multiple different ways. Manifested in research, public health research with large organizations like the World Food Program, with Central American nutrition programs, with the Action Against Hunger, so a lot of NGOs. I've also done a lot of writing and health communication, and so throughout, kind of as initially as a kind of like a side gig, I would do a lot of blogging and writing and trying to have an impact on people's understanding of the complexities of nutrition, fitness, wellness. And most recently, I've been applying my skills as a nutrition coach. And so I have multiple degrees, but currently the thing that is most interesting to me is health behavior change, and through health communication and working directly with clients. And so nutrition, fitness, and wellness coaching has kind of been where I feel like I can most
Great. Thank you so much. I think a couple of things that just struck me a lot and wanted to just understand more about is we often don't hear nutrition anthropology and wanted to know what exactly does it entail, and also a little curious on what motivated you to just do these wide spectrum of things, and particularly in this industry. I mean, I understand you're very passionate about it, but just wanted to know if there's any larger objective or reason behind picking all these up.
Yeah, so they're actually connected, the two of those. And so, so to answer your question, so what is nutritional anthropology? It's a cultural perspective on food and eating, and more specifically, the relationship that humans have with food across cultures. And so when we have that vision of nutritional anthropology, not only do we think of food as something that provides nutrients, but we understand food as having meaning and being important for social interaction, and that we have different ways of understanding food, and that food is not morally neutral, as we usually say. Like, different cultures do have different relationships with different elements in food. And so I found that fascinating. And the way that I found it was actually, so I'm bicultural. I'm born and raised in Guatemala, Latin America. And my parents, the short story is my parents are from the US. You can tell from my American accent in English. And so I also have spent some time living in Hong Kong when I was in high school. Thank goodness I was able to just make friends from all over the world. So I was able to travel. And these experiences just really opened my eyes to, there's different ways, well, in a lot of different ways, but I think related to what we are talking about is there's a lot of different ways to experience health, and there's a lot of different ways to experience wellness. And so kind of that triggers how do I I discovered anthropology. I said, this is fascinating. Like, I love connecting with people. I love learning about their experiences and seeing how their particular experiences have shaped in the way they make decisions and all of that sort of stuff. And so I knew that I wanted to focus on anthropology in undergrad. And then in undergrad, I found while I went to Tufts University for studying undergrad in anthropology, and while I was in Tufts University, there was a a hurricane with a devastating flood that occurred in Guatemala. And so trying to understand everything that was going on, one of the things that struck me is that there was just funds, and probably very similar things happened in India as well. You have just funds flooding into the country, but you don't see significant changes in what is actually occurring in terms of malnutrition, in terms of chronic disease, and all that sort of stuff. And so the big question I have is, what is happening nutrition that even with the funds, even with the professionals, we're not seeing the significant change? And so the big kind of moment of inspiration for me is I feel like disciplines are not interacting, they're not talking to each other. Everyone kind of sees things through their tunnel vision, and that's the only way things exist, and not only in their profession but also their cultural experience and the way things like should be done. And so I discovered nutritional anthropology as this way to have cross-discipline communication. And I think it's, I say I'm a nutritional anthropologist because that's ultimately it's the easiest way to explain it. But I see the impact of the clinical approach, of public health, of communication, of economics. Like I see just like the multidisciplinary impact of the way that we, as a human, at the end of the day, experience nutrition and I hope that answers your question, but ultimately that is the reason why I felt like it was so important, and it continues to be important to me to have kind of that wider understanding of the nutrition and fitness industry, but at the same time, not only wide, but deep, right? And so actually having that one-on-one experience when possible.
I'm really inspired by hearing this whole journey of how you got into this and how you picked based on your experience of even growing up across different parts of the world. Really inspiring story. Now, I think just moving on to a couple of things I would love to just understand from you is you work with really large clients, be it the World Food Program, ISSA, and I know you also work with a few startups which are largely in the health and wellness space. Would love to understand what are some of the innovative strategies or things that you worked on. If that's not confidential to share, can totally understand, but just want to understand any high level impact or strategies that you worked on that you really enjoyed doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think innovation often exists. How do I put this in kind of succinct words? So I feel like innovation comes about when you connect the dots of information that is already out there in a way that perhaps hasn't been done before. And so it's not necessarily a totally unique, unheard of technology, right? So in the field of human sciences, it often is just connecting the dots in different ways. And sometimes it's listening to lived experiences and connecting them to potentially solutions to a lot of the problems they're feeling, or they're experiencing. So how do I see innovation when I'm working with these larger clients is one, listening to the stakeholders, right? That is such an important aspect of it. So the stakeholders really depend on who you're working with. So it could be community members, it could be patients, it could be public health professionals, it could be CEOs, really depending on who the stakeholders are, and often they're multiple. So understanding their experience of things and talking to multiple stakeholders, so not just seeing things through your tunnel vision. And then once you do have those perspectives, asking the difficult questions and trying to figure out how, and sometimes it means that you don't have the knowledge. Sometimes you need to go to someone else and say, hey, I'm trying to understand how, for example, how climate change has had such an impact on chronic disease levels, for example. And I'm having trouble connecting these. So then going and asking those questions. So having that humility and saying, there are things that I don't know. I'm going to go ask the people who do. And so ultimately it comes back to, I think what I was kind of referring to a little bit at the beginning is having these cross-disciplinary approaches and perspectives, and ultimately listening to a lot of different people, and you using your mind to help connect the dots about what might be going on and offering solutions.
I mean, those sounds like a lot of moving parts and integrated to sort of make a few things work. Sounds super complicated, but I mean, glad to hear that you've navigated through these kind of complex architectural projects. I wanted to understand a little bit on, I mean, going by what I read about you and the kind of knowledge that you have, it came from doing a lot of degrees. And I also know you have wide range of experience in this. You also have a couple of pets at home, you have kids to take care of. Just wanted to understand, how do you take out time for managing all of this? I think that one thing that a lot of people, even I meet fitness coaches particularly, they struggle to balance their time. So if you could just share your piece of wisdom on this, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say it's not there's no magic solution. I don't know if I have the solution to that. I think the what has worked and allowed me to feel comfortable at home while also feeling comfortable in my professional life, because I knew that I've always wanted to have that professional experience while still having a family, which I know is not necessarily for everyone, but in our case, it's what we wanted. And so I think the biggest thing is knowing yourself and being true to yourself and saying what is important to you, right? So if that is important to you, communicating that to your village, the people who are around you, right? So your family, if you have extended family to help out, if you realize you do not have that strong of a village, and saying, okay, what is within our budget to ask for support for babysitters or nannies or whatever the case may be. And I think having that communication is going to be really clear about, okay, this is the time that I need, or the space that I need to work on this particular thing. And this is how we're going to balance it with all of the things that are going on in the family. I actually heard recently that, and I can't even remember who the professional was. I'll have to see. I don't know if it was, I won't see the name, but recently I saw someone saying that there are children-focused families, there are parents or caregiver-focused families, and there are family-focused families. And so I thought that was such a great perspective on how to make things work. So when you have a family-focused family, you need to work with your partner, you need to work with your children, you need to work with your extended support system to make the family as a system or as a unit work. And sometimes that does mean that you do need to sacrifice things, but not just you. Everyone's gonna kind of have to sacrifice things to make things work and to prioritize things that are important for them, but they also need to know like what they're personally capable of, right? And I think on a more concrete level, what has worked for us is before having kids, I wasn't really a person that was a schedule person. Like I was able to accommodate to schedules. I like being on time. I would be on class on time. I would be, if I had a meeting, I would always be there on time. But I tended to like the flexibility and to like work late at night and wake up early if I needed to. Like weekends didn't really exist. But ever since having kids, I've had to structure myself a lot more. And surprisingly, it worked for me. I thought it was going to be a lot more difficult, because ultimately what it made me do is having a concrete schedule that in some ways forced me to commit and to organize myself within a particular period, so that I still felt like I could be fully present with my kids. And I'm not perfect. It doesn't always work. And sometimes I do space out and stress out. And so that also, I think the last thing I would say is to forgive yourself and to forgive your partner. Sometimes things are going to get out of hand and stressful, and sometimes we're not going to communicate the way that we probably should. So just kind of touching base and seeing how we can prevent those sort of issues from happening in the future.
It's interesting that you brought about having a schedule. Just curious on that. Did it make you feel you're working more, you're working less, or were you being more productive by following a schedule? Often, I think if you have a fixed set of time for everything, life doesn't work that way. You overshoot, you overwork. But just want to understand how did things play out for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I started realizing that I needed to be on a much more schedule than my son. So I think kids And when my 5-year-old was 6 months old, that's when I realized like this isn't working anymore. Like I was nursing with him on the couch at like 2 a.m. trying to get a report in, and I was like, this is not working anymore. And he was young enough that he didn't care. But once they start needing to be on a schedule and everything, I said, okay, no, I need to start structuring myself. And so I did commit to basically having like a regular 9 to 5, or in my case it was like 8 to 4, 8 to 5, depending on what the needs were. And so that way I was able to schedule in like childcare or coordinate with my husband, and it forced me to be more productive. And so it did take some time to transition, and I'm not saying this works for everyone, but for us and for me particularly, it did allow me to kind of force having that time. And what I found too is that the days where I didn't need all that time, right? So maybe I finished what I needed to do. So I said, okay, this is the time I have to get whatever it is I need to get done. So I have to basically look at what's urgent and what's important and see how to best utilize that time. So sometimes that meant resting, right? Mm-hmm. Listening to myself. Sometimes that meant, getting a couple of project applications or grant applications in. And sometimes that meant doing things for the house that would allow me to have more free time over the weekend. And so having a system in place and kind of like a decision tree, so how am I going to make decisions when I do have extra time, or if I get behind, has been helpful. I am not a type A person. And so that was a challenge. And in some weeks it did not work. Like some weeks I felt like my whole to-do list was like carrying over to the next week. But ultimately it did allow me to get to know myself a little bit more and see what was realistic for me.
That's great to hear. I think just being more mindful of what works for us, I think, is more important. Like you said, I think something that really you can carry forward and work along. Great. And I think now wanted to just understand a little bit more about your work with various set of clients, be it large scale organizations, or even individual clients you probably needed some help on nutrition guidance or just general well-being. Could you share any inspiring stories that just you very fondly remember about working with these clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So I absolutely love nutrition and wellness coaching. Like it is something that fulfills me and fills my cup so much. And I think building those connections with clients and really understanding what success means to them has been really important. So, definitely not, I don't want to compare myself to other coaches because there's going to be different programs, different approaches. And I really do hope that clients ultimately do find the coach that works for them. In my case, the way that I work with, so I tend to work with clients who are parents or caregivers and have kids on all different stages, because I understand just the complexities of trying to take care of yourself and little people and the family at large. And so really understanding what their current challenges are, understanding what their current strengths are, and what it would look like to feel your best, right? So when we have like strict goals, sometimes it can be because you have a chronic disease that you really need to get things under control, or if you are really deep in the fitness world and you do have athletic goals. And so, but for most people, it's like, I just want to feel better. I don't want to, have high blood pressure, right? So how do I put that realistically into my lifestyle? And so I kind of share that background, just kind of give a little bit of background about and so I'll do success stories. And so I say success stories, I still work with these clients. And so success, like I said, really just means like you feeling better and feeling like you ultimately are able to manage and make decisions that are much more informed and that are beneficial for your health and well-being in the long term. And so I have one client who came to me postpartum, and she had 3 other girls, and it was a family that she never really expected to have such a big family. But she, was very happy with it, but was also very overwhelmed and realized that it had been literally years since she had conscientiously cared for herself. And at the same time, she was working part-time. So just had a lot of things on her plate. So it was kind of like she's like, I don't even know where to start. Like, I have complex health issues that she shared with me. I'm not really sure how to manage them. I also just don't feel great. I'm also nursing. Like there was a lot of things going on that clearly she felt very overwhelmed. And so in that process, it was like, okay, right now, what would make you feel better in the next week? Like what? And she's like, I just feel like I don't even know how to build a healthy plate for myself. Right. She's like, I basically live off of leftovers from my kids and eat when I can. And so then learning, so to not go like through the week by week process, but ultimately for her, success meant being much more aware of what she was eating, but in a positive way. Right. And so not being, worried or feeling about like cheat meals or, overeating like that. It was just getting enough nutrition and feeling confident in what was on her plate was actually nourishing her body. And so that required just an education process, checking in, so that she ultimately felt empowered that she can make meals for herself and for her family that are balanced and that are assisting in managing the complex health conditions that she had. Right. And so then after that, I was like, okay, I feel much more confident in my nutrition now. The next step is exercise. Right. So how in my crazy life do I integrate movement, which is usually when we're talking not even about fitness, like usually we start with just movement, like moving more, and then potentially graduating into exercise. And then we can talk about getting to a point when we're actually measuring fitness, if that is part of your goal. But just integrating movement and exercise into your daily life as having 4 children is not easy and working, So that has been super. And so I continue to work with her. I have a long time working with her, and you can just in our conversations, her confidence. She's excited about what she eats. She's like, she tries out new things. And then physically, a lot of her health issues are under control, which has been also the most important thing for her ultimately. I also have another client. I'll be much more succinct with this client. So he's a dad of 2 young kids, and he came to me after he had been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And he knew that he was at risk. He had a lot of knowledge about diabetes and just was kind of like, this is never going to happen to me. He had family members that had lived with it. And so for him, it was the approach was a little bit different, but at the same time, he wanted to be able to feel like he was enjoying his meals without feeling like they were being overly restrictive. So obviously he was on, a medical therapeutic diet because he had to manage the type 2 diabetes, which I supported him with. But ultimately finding ways in which he could still continue to enjoy his food and live an active lifestyle. And with the goal of eventually, with, of course, support from his healthcare team, being able to get off the meds that he was on to manage, just managing it with lifestyle. It's been a year so far, and he has significantly reduced the meds that he is on through that coaching approach. And so just seeing that patience and that persistence and the really being part of that support system for them has been the ultimate success.
And those are 2 really very inspiring stories. And I think, I mean, obviously both are really great, but I think I just can't imagine a life where like you're dealing with so many kids and you also have to take care of yourself. Must have been really stressful, but glad to know that she has got into a better place, and even the other client as well. Now I think just curious to understand a small thing on like even initially we were talking about the reason we started this podcast is to bring quality information to everyone interested in the space. Now that brings to a question where there's just so much of information available out there, both on fitness and nutrition, diet, and all sort of things. And obviously a lot of them are very clearly myths that just go round and round. Are there any very obvious things that people do wrong, or something that you really like to just tell people that, hey, this is something you should never do, but just people don't understand that why it is wrong or something?
Yeah, so I'll try to be succinct. I'm obviously not very good at being succinct, but this is something I just love talking about. So I'll mention 3.
Great. Sorry,
Yeah,
I
I'll
just
mention 3
loving
myths.
this conversation.
I'll mention 3 myths that I really like to debunk. And so the first is cultural foods can't be healthy. So that is one of the biggest myths out there. I think that is, we have to understand that a lot of the information about health and fitness is driven by the US and Europe, and which is then going to be informed by their dietary patterns. And so often I see in multicultural societies like the United States, for example, or Canada, we'll see health professionals making these blanket recommendations about what a diet needs to look like without making space for those cultural adequacies, right? And so understanding that there are many, almost endless ways to meet your wellness needs through fitness. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to have access to a gym, though that's fine, right? People like gyms are a relatively new thing, right? in the history of humanity. And that there are multiple ways to meet our nutrition needs that are not only through what we see as like perhaps the stereotypical USDA My Plate, right? So understanding that sometimes as a health professional, that means that you do need to have growth mindset and understanding and learning about, okay, what does healthy look like here? How maybe looking at the nutritional breakdown foods not necessarily familiar with, but then understanding, okay, how do these foods together with lifestyle really fit into people's wellness? And how can I, when I'm working with a client that is perhaps identifies with a particular culture, is of that culture, then being open as a health professional, saying, hey, I'm going to learn because I don't want to put my ideas on you. So I think that's one, is cultural foods can't be healthy is a huge myth. Another one is that there are quote unquote, well, good foods and bad foods, or healthy and unhealthy foods. This is something I actually work on with my son a lot, because at school they teach him healthy and unhealthy, and I'm kind of a gray area sort of person, right? Because individual foods, if you eat, unless you're allergic to it, it's toxic or it's spoiled. Foods are just foods, and it's not going to have a significant impact on your health if you eat it once, right? And so we really need to look at diet overall, how those foods interact with each other in meals, and ultimately how they make you feel, right? So once we take away kind of that healthy and unhealthy labels from foods, it allows us to in some ways break free from a lot of the limitations that we might feel, and then approach foods and like, okay, what does my body actually need, and what does my mind actually need, and how can I meet those needs in a way that's more neutral, right? So then you don't feel the guilt after, eating a cookie or ice cream or whatever it is, because you're aware of how it can fit into a healthy overall lifestyle. Then the last one I'll just mention is that BMI is way overused. Right. So the myth, I guess, perhaps would be that BMI is the most important health measure when it comes to nutrition and fitness. And except if you are an athlete, right, where body composition is really like you have to meet very specific standards in body composition in some sports, which we've been hearing a lot with the Olympics and everything like that. For the average person, BMI is usually not useful. Right. And so that's not to say that body composition does not have an impact on health. But what I'm saying is that BMI is really not an effective measure of body composition. And so much so that a lot of now medical professionals are saying, hey, like if you are using BMI in the clinic, that can't be a reason to diagnose anything. Like that's got to be paired with blood pressure. It's got to be paired with blood tests to see if there's actually health issues with this person, because it is possible to be healthy with different body shapes and sizes that BMI can really gloss over in a lot of ways.
Wow, these are really insightful. And I think I learned all of these three things today itself. There's always a little bit of a guilt when you eat something that is supposedly unhealthy, right? You have a brownie, you have anything else that has a lot of sugar. So, but I think, yeah, like you said, once in a while is okay. There has to be a balance and a couple of things. But no, thank you for sharing this. I do have a lot of questions to ask, but I want to be mindful of your time. And I think we want to just close out with a last question on you said that you would like to work with mostly clients who are families and taking care of kids and other things. So what are some of the advice you would give to them to lead an active and healthy life? something that is not too much complicated so that they can at least start following and get started?
For the parents or for the families?
I think both will be great. I mean, if you can share more.
Yeah, so it's really going to depend on the family and what their lives and their demands actually look like. I think as a just general recommendation is really understanding, or rather kind of committing to as a family, that whatever that might look like, that meeting your physiological needs for food and nutrition together with moving your bodies are going to provide a lot of benefits to you as individuals and as a family. So it's going to keep you healthier. It's going to prevent illness. It's going to bring you all together as a family. It's going to really affect your mood if you're having your physiological needs met. And when we prioritize those things, and sometimes it means that you can communicate and figure it out as a family. Sometimes it does mean that you need to bring in a professional to help you figure out how that might work for you. Like me as a coach, that's one of the things I love to do, is understanding their realities. And so knowing those things that are going to be important for you as individuals and you as a family, now how do you fit that into your schedule? Is it everyone going off and doing individual sports? Is it planning hikes and family activities together? Is it taking turns in planning the meals? So what does that actually look like? So that's the biggest thing, is just keeping those as important for you as a family, and then trying to make it work the best you can.
Great. Thank you so much, Sasha. This is really, really great. I do have one very small question. This is just out of curiosity, is that, I mean, given that you worked in this space for too long, do you have any favorite recipe or your go-to meal that you usually enjoy that's probably healthy or easy to make, something that you would recommend anyone to try out?
Sure. So what I like to recommend, rather than a recipe, is kind of like a formula that I use for building meals that are healthy. And so that way also it helps kind of keep it cross-cultural. And so when I build meals, I try to make sure that there's something that's contributing fiber, there's something that's contributing protein, there's something that's contributing a healthy fat, and antioxidants, right? And so in that formula, there's a lot of different ways that we can build it, right? So for example, and I know this is not necessarily culturally applicable for everybody, but like for me, what works is, it takes like 5 minutes. I'll take a piece of whole wheat toast. I put on either like an egg, any way I have it. If I have like boiled eggs, I'll use a boiled egg, or I'll whip up a scrambled egg, put that on top, slice up some avocado, and maybe I'll put on like some spices or something like that. And I'll eat that and have a handful of berries. And so that way I have my fiber met with the whole wheat toast. And when I say fiber, I like looking at carbohydrate sources as fiber sources, because there's so much negative talk around carbohydrates, and we need carbohydrates, right? So when we think of carbohydrates, let's choose those that do provide fiber. That way that they're, a way, when possible, right? They're a way to provide other things besides just the energy, right? And then we have the protein with the egg, we have the healthy fat with the avocado, and then I'll have a handful of berries with the antioxidants. So that formula can be applicable, and just like, okay, I need to whip something together for me and for my family. Let's put together these parts so that I feel confident that, I'm getting what I need. It's something that's contributing to my nutrition.
Great. Thank you so much for this. I mean, really loved this conversation and learned a lot today. Thank you for taking our time and sharing your thoughts.
Yeah, my pleasure. So great to meet you. And if you ever want to have me back, I'm more than happy to talk.
Yeah, I would love to, definitely.